Welcome to the Business Focus podcast. Before we start, can we ask one thing? 74% of you that watch this channel frequently do not subscribe. If you've enjoyed our videos, please could you do me a favor and hit the subscribe button? It helps this channel more than you know, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the learning gets. Welcome to the Business Focus podcast. Jonathan Herbst is the host of the Business Focus podcast. He is a strategic advisor, coach, and mentor to entrepreneurial business owners, CEOs, and senior executives. In this podcast, he chats with entrepreneurs, founders, and CEOs of scaling companies. It centers around their entrepreneurial journey so far and their aspirations for their companies.
Hi there. Welcome again to my Business Focus podcast. Today it's my great pleasure to introduce Jeremy Goldschmidt, who's CEO and founder of RentBetter. Welcome, Jeremy.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
No, thank you so much for taking the time. So why don't we just kick straight in? What is RentBetter? What do you do? How long have you been doing it? Give me a little bit of background on you and the company if you can.
Yeah, sure. So RentBetter is a tech platform for self-managing landlords. So those people who might have an investment property or a rental property and are looking to effectively take control of their investment and manage it themselves without going down the traditional agent path. The business has been going for about 7 years now. We've had funding for about 5 years, so we usually use that sort of as the milestone for the business. But prior to that, it was sort of, again, in its early stages as a proof of concept, something that I was very much working on. And, particularly in the last sort of 12 to 18 months, we've seen a really sort of good uptick in terms of growth. And we're seeing that, there's about 2 million landlords in Australia who claim rental income on their tax return. And we're seeing a nice shift from, the traditional agency model, which typically had about 75-80% of the landlord population. We're seeing a shift in that towards what we believe is sort of the self-managed and the future way of managing your own property.
Right. Because I was meeting with a holiday letting agency this morning that do over one of our properties. So I'm current on some of the
Yeah, okay, good.
So tell me, who is landlords? Are we talking mum and dad? Who's your core customer?
Yeah, so look, Australia has this really nice, if you like, structural dimension to it that, every mum and dad, it seems, has a stake or a share in the property market. So we have really wide-ranging participation where it works out that something like 1 in 5 or about 20% of the adult population over 40 is claiming rental income. And it's not, you typically think it's something like your millionaires, your property tycoons who have the sort of big property holdings. But in Australia, we are in the unique position whereby, the average participant has about 100K a year annual income. So it is sort of the everyday mum and dad, and it can range from, the nurses, teachers, police officers, right through to the sort of, if you like, corporate white collar type workers. And it's not the same sort of structural makeup as, say, in the UK or the US, where you find that it's only really about 5% of the sort of adult retail population that's participating in property. And they have, these huge institutions, and that's why we have the idea of slumlords, because there it's really high concentration in either old families who own the land or institutions who've bought it all up. In Australia, we all participate, and I guess in some ways that makes us the lucky country because we've all been able to grow our own wealth off the back of the property market increasing.
Okay. So maybe do you mind if we dig deeper? So I've got my rental property next door. One of the big agency groups is managing it for me. What's the difference between them doing it and me paying my whatever it is, 8.5%, and you managing it? What's the difference?
Yeah, absolutely. The starting point for all of this is that we're not a property manager, so we're a software and a tech platform that allows you to do it. As a result of you doing it, A, it will increase the level of control and transparency that you have over that property and over your investment. B, you'll be able to save a fair bit just because by the nature of you doing it yourself means that you are cutting out a person who is otherwise charging margin. And finally, you'll have access to all the same sort of tools and services that an agent would use, but you would be employing it, which We regularly get a lot of love mail and feedback from people that having the sort of a ability to manage it themselves has totally changed the dynamic. And the reason I say that, and not to sort of, it's pretty easy to say bad things about property managers and agents, and I don't wish to do that. I think, typically when you have a property manager, they're managing a portfolio of, say, 150 properties. They are getting hit from all angles. They're usually only hearing from the landlord when there's something bad that's happened. They're usually only hearing from the tenant when there's a problem. Somehow they're caught in the middle. In theory, they're supposed to govern the tenancy and the agreement, but end up with some, I guess, the name of their role as an agent means that they end up being sort of accused by both parties of acting in someone else's best interests. So the model itself is fairly tricky for that traditional property manager. Whereas when you are a self-managing landlord, it's very clear that you care more than anyone would about your property, about your investment and your asset. B, the interaction between you and your tenant is very, very different. And this is something that time and time again we hear. If you, as the landlord, treat your tenant as a customer, it's someone who's paying you 20 to 30K a year for a service, effectively, which is to live in the property and for it to be looked after. The dynamic between the two of you as the decision maker and the person who's receiving the benefit, but ultimately looking after the property and paying, is extremely different. And I had the chance to speak to, I guess, a long-term sort of quite loyal customer of ours who said to me yesterday, the fact that we just set up at the very beginning of our lease the expectations of what the tenant expected and what I expected as the landlord meant we cut out all the faff of talking about, should this happen, should that happen. It just meant that we knew up front what we each wanted and could manage to that. So by having a platform that sort of governs the processes and automates many of the, if you like, workflows that are required, it gives you...
I'm going to dig you into a bit.
Yeah.
So what, you link with the bank so
let me run through from beginning to end, because I think that might help. So let's just say you were looking to find a tenant. You would come onto the RentBetter platform, you would set up your ads, they'll go through to the major property sites, so realestate.com.au, domain, rent.com.au. You'll be able to handle inquiries. There's the sort of standard industry applications that'll come through to you. You can run tenant checks through Equifax. So you'll be able to sort of see and make a decision about who the right tenant is and select them, and there's guidance along the way for that. Assuming you've selected your tenant, you're going to want to create a lease agreement. And we have, for each state and territory around the country, we have the relevant or the recommended lease agreement in the platform. You can create it, send it to your tenant. They'll be able to review and sign it. You can both sign that electronically on the platform. When it comes to things like condition reports, again, you can create it, save it, send it through the platform. You can even book a third party through our system to go and conduct that inspection for you. And then finally, when it comes to the terms of that agreement, so there's like a duration and a frequency of payments and an amount, the system's able to basically generate out that rental payment schedule. Your tenants will be able to pay through a number of different methods, whether it's credit card or bank account. And effectively, those payments are going to run according to the agreement you've just set up. And so the receipting is automated, the ledger is automatically populated, it can be adjusted as required. People often talk about renewing a lease as a very painful process that they get charged for by an agency. That can happen in about 30 seconds on the platform, and both parties can review and sign. It's a software play that helps you to do that. When it comes to things like maintenance or even tenant bills and expenses, it's all on platform, so it can be done with a few clicks. And look, ultimately what we find is that our customers are the very people that you would expect. They're probably around 40 plus, and that just by its nature is, in Australia, you obviously have to save up a fair bit for a deposit for a property, so you tend to see fewer younger people who own properties. It's not to say they don't exist, but for the most part, you tend to see a more established set of customers who have saved and been able to invest. That they'll typically be somebody who is either looking to save money or has actually had an experience with a property manager where they're not very satisfied with the way it worked out and believe they can do it better. And, our goal is to create a rental experience that is simply better and allows our customers to say, well, it's a pretty low price and I'd almost be a bit reckless not using this thing because it delivers value and it's what I want.
Okay. Just two things, questions. I'm assuming you must handle the bond as well.
Yeah, so actually most states have lifted their game a fair bit and will offer things like BPay for the tenant to pay direct into the bond authority. And so we would recommend that approach. There are still a number of states that don't do that. So yes, you can sort of process the payment for the bond and then transfer it off to the bond authority. But we would typically recommend going direct to the authority.
And how does your pricing work compared to a normal agent?
So we'd be about 10% of the cost of a traditional agent. So what we typically say, and again, there's a bunch of calcs and assumptions in there, but it's about $2,000 a year that you'd be saving using the platform, where somebody's got multiple properties, or if you were looking at it over a long-term horizon. So let's just say you looked at owning your property for about 10 years. That $2,000 a year ends up being quite meaningful and is probably a step towards your next property. So from our perspective, and we're really a product-led business. So where the product's working and it's delivering value, people like it, they refer it to their friends and family, and so we've sort of grown out of that. But we just fundamentally believe, it's not to say that everybody will do it themselves. There will, in my opinion, if today we're operating in an environment where about 75% of the market's with an agent, 25 is self-managed, I don't think it'll go to 100-0. I think there's always room for those service models because people like it. But I do think it'll shift towards maybe, 50-50 or 60-40 to the point where the experience and the system and the process just works. And so for many people, it would be a question as to why would I do it any other way?
Congratulations. It sounds fabulous.
Thanks. Look, we'll
look at it next time I renew.
Yeah. And look, it's absolutely a team sport, right? So we are a smallish team, but everybody is pulling their weight and working super hard. And, for us, it's actually quite a kick to see that people are using it and loving it. And the feedback we get is generally extremely positive. So, we're solving a problem and we're helping people save money, which is usually a good recipe.
Okay, right. So, Joey, going back to, my questions I'm supposed to be asking. So we've all been through the pandemic. What things did you do as you went through the pandemic? What did you execute in the business and stuck with you going forward?
Well, look, the first and most obvious one, which I suspect you get answered a lot, is the way the team operates is now remarkably different. Whereas we were very wedded to an office before, we all sat together, and yes, there were benefits from being in close proximity, but we looked very quickly to work remotely and to operate in a way that utilizes, if you like, the tools that are available in today's world. Excuse me, and that's things like systems for monitoring work and tickets, right through to Miro and online whiteboards and things like that. We operate a little bit differently to the way we used to, and we are all. I don't think we're certainly not at the stage where I can say we all operate asynchronously at all times, but we are, on the step towards a journey which I think we all agree we'd like, where yes, we're a team, yes, we've got a cohesive culture, but we're actually able to operate independently. And should we be in different time zones, that's not an inhibitor to the growth of the business. So that's very much stuck. From a customer point of view, and I should probably clarify, did you mean from how the business operates or from how we, either or?
Anyway.
So look, I think that's probably the most long lasting, and to this day is still how we operate. From a customer point of view, I think, the pandemic helped a little bit in a way because it, and you see these quotes from time to time of, 20 years of digital transformation was pushed forward in 1 year with one pandemic. Yeah. So we've definitely, I think, seen the benefit of that, where it appears that most consumers in Australia now have an expectation that whatever it is they do in life, they've kind of got a platform and a dashboard for doing it. And that's just how you manage. Yep. And, there's a plethora of them for everything that you do. And it's probably going to lead to fatigue of all, one day someone will come up with the dashboard of dashboards. But for us now, I think what we've seen is that there's a much higher level of acceptance of a lot of things that before, even electronic signatures, we definitely saw people say, nah, I'll just print it and take it to the person. Now we definitely see a greater expectation that those things are available and it's how it's done. And that absolutely helps us.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally understand. And same with my business. I've still got clients I've never met, face to face.
Yeah.
Which, given that I'm CEO and founder coach is quite extraordinary.
Yeah.
No, there it is. So, you've been a business owner now for what, 7 years, I think. Is that about right?
Yeah.
What do you think has been your greatest learning, your biggest learning since becoming a business owner?
Look, it's easy to get really deep and profound on this one because there's so many levels to it. And I think, the one thing that sort of sticks out to me when I hear that question probably relates back to time and prioritization. And it's totally obvious, but, one of the most precious commodities in the business that I probably didn't totally value early on because you're just building a business and there's adrenaline and you're rushing, but they're really, to my time and to the team's time, there is a tremendous cost, and being able to focus on things and know what we're focusing on is the right thing. That, it sounds extremely surface level and obvious, but getting that right over time, I think, has been a thing that we've learned to just say no to things because they don't make sense. And it's actually just a distraction. It might be fun and interesting, but it's no good. So I think, the value of prioritizing time and focus is really critical. I think, again, probably sounds a little bit basic and obvious, but working with good people is just super critical. And I think, at different times we've had probably something that wasn't quite right, or maybe a bit toxic in the way that it impacts the business or the way we operate. And, in a sense, I think that we moved quickly and rectified the situation, but I'll always wish that we moved a bit faster because those things actually just have this heavy pull and drag on a team of people who are trying to do something new. And it's not sort of a given that you'll either survive or get to the other side of this giant hurdle that you're trying to climb. And so anything that's adding drag or weight to that process really needs to go quickly. And I, would encourage others who are in either a startup or a business journey that recognizing that pretty quickly and moving on it. If your gut's telling you it's probably, there's a reason. And look, I think probably the other one, which is, I don't know that there's a lesson in it, but it's probably just, if I reflect on my experience, there's been from day one a great deal of belief and conviction in what we're doing. And it's why we do it, right? It seems like we're a disruptor to an age-old traditional model that hasn't, many real estate agents still send checks. It's not like the world's changed that much, yet it has. And so there's a great deal of, if you like, sort of headwinds to the things that you're doing just because you're doing something different. And I think there's something to be said for the belief and that conviction and knowing that every day you're making it a little bit better and being able, I guess, to continue with a great level of determination and probably persistency even more, continue to push that forward. And I, someone said to me the other day, people always think that startups are driven by levels of determination, but in some ways it's kind of just how many punches you can withstand, because you're going to keep getting hit over and over. And if your limit is 10 versus someone else's who's 20, that may make all the difference. And yes, there's a level of determination in getting back up again, but I just think that there's something in it, which is, do I believe that? Yes, keep going.
You made some really, really good points in there. Team of A players, working high on your values and productivity in their role. Purpose. Having a purpose-driven organization is always such an accelerator. Hire slow, fire fast. What else was there? One of the points I'm gonna pick up on, and it's that time piece. I mentioned Jeremy. I drove up from Jervis Bay this morning, and I'm listening again to a book written by one of my mentors, who's a guy, Dan Sullivan, who runs a business in the US called Strategic Coach, and he's been my coach for the last couple of years. And he got another fellow wrote a book called 10x is easier than 2x. 10x your business is easier than 2x. And one of the points he made, which I thought was really, as I said, I've listened to this and read it a couple of times now. He was talking about, they were talking about the fact, there are only 60 minutes in an hour. when we all have the same 60 minutes. It's how we use them, and how we, and how we say no to things, that set us apart. The point I want to make is that they were talking about value of time, and for an entrepreneur, I call it rejuvenation days, focus days, and preparation days. So today, for instance, even though I've been driving up from the coast, has actually been a focus day for me. I was working on a property we owned down there, meeting with agents, holiday lettings, a bit different to what you do.
Yeah.
I met with a potential, looked at another property we're looking to buy. I've then done a one-on-one coaching session with the founder just a moment ago, and I'm now doing this. So this is one of my focus days where I'm focused on things that are going to grow, my holistic business. And I have 3, sometimes 4, preferably 3 focus days every week. And I'm really focused on growth, that 10x piece. Then there's the preparation days. And Monday is my preparation day when I do meetings with my team, where I'm deep diving into things to fix it. And as Dan describes it, it's the backstage day. And then finally, there is these rejuvenation days, or free days, as Dan describes it. And they are so critical to entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial staff, because it's only when you stop and don't do anything that you come up with your best ideas. Because when you're immersed, you miss the stuff.
Yep.
And, my aha moment this morning, even though it was partly a free day because I was had a cup of tea on the deck there on the water, and it was just fabulous. But my aha moment this morning, I've been trying to manage this property now for, through an Airbnb and everything else, for years I've been doing it. It's like, well, what in the hell am I doing? Who, not how? We should be hiring someone, So happened this morning. But it's taking that time out to really for rejuvenation, which is where, it's interesting. That's where I find all of the little bits of brilliance come out of. And as I explained to you, that's where this podcast came from.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think, I have had various stages of this journey where I've been better or worse at balancing all of that. And, I was reflecting again just before we started this call that there was a time where I used to structure my day in terms of sort of business development, operations, and, new product. And as we've grown, which is what you want, you get extremely busy and you sort of lose some of those structures. So I feel like it sort of goes in waves. I'm not sure that I've ever managed a nice straight line of how to handle it. But I also do recognize, and, we talked a moment ago about having young children. I think that in many ways they're the canary in the coal mine, and you hear it pretty quickly from them if either they're not getting the attention they need, or you feel pretty quickly when you're not doing the right thing by family. So I'm lucky that I have I guess the support of my wife and family and kids and all the rest. But I think that striking that balance, as you say, is a really difficult one, particularly when your mind is tuned to be thinking about the business and the growth of the business in every waking moment. Like there's and something else that I'm focused on.
It is hard. Yeah. Well, we had one of those moments this morning, because I normally, my job, what I choose to do is I get the kids, I wake them up, I make sure they're dressed, I actually have breakfast, I do their lunch, I drop them to school. So that's my time with the kids. And in fact, at 3:25, the kids will be getting home from school, and I've got an hour with them. So that's they're blocked into my day every single day, which is one of the great privileges of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
But my son was telling me, Dad, on the phone this morning, he said, Dad, we had such an issue. I checked under my pillow 3 times this morning. Apparently a tooth fell out last night. The tooth fairy hadn't been, and I won't spoil the surprise for people by telling you that the fairy works. But and then just before I went to school, I went in and the tooth fairy had been. She must be really busy, Dad.
That's nice. Well done. At least you got there.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, I've digressed too far. Tell me, when you think of the word successful, who comes to mind and why?
That's probably not. There's many dimensions to it. Like, it's not that there's, I think, a specific individual that I would mention straight away. I think there's in different dimensions or different spheres of life, there's probably individuals that I, would separate, whether it's people who have managed to, if you like, balance the family and the entrepreneurial side, whether it's people who have managed to, on a, if you like, a personal front, have traits that sort of I admire or that I think are worth developing further. So I don't know that there's an individual whose name that I could place, but there are, I guess I'd call it a series of informal mentors and people that I will, I guess, speak to, work with, deal with on as frequent a basis as I can, to make sure that I continue to sort of enhance and learn from that.
Okay, so if you're not going to name a name, what are the attributes of a success?
Sure. Look, I think for me, what is very important is that balance we talked about, and I'll be the first to admit that I'm not great at it. Not to say that there isn't a lot of time spent with family and kids, and that they are absolutely first priority. But I think also there's a lot of work to get done, and so I am very much involved in the business and driving that forward. Look, the attribute of being able to, I think, compartmentalize and be able to time box and know when the right level of activity is at the right level of the organization, I think is really super critical.
Yeah.
And there's obviously certain people I've worked with over time, or certain people I've seen do that really, really well. I think I came from a career in consulting, and you always have in I guess professional services firms, you always have sort of this idea of a rainmaker who's out doing deals and selling business, and everyone's got their own particular style, and I have my own particular style, but there's certain levels of being able to, if you like, be the catalyst and fire starter and generate activity and do something from nothing. And to some degree, I've tried to take some of that into creating this business and the way I do it, but there's certain ways that I've always admired the people who do that well, are literally able to continue to create win-win situations for all parties involved and be likable and, make sure that everyone gets what they want. And I think I've tried very much to bring that to the business. And finally, I sort of mentioned this idea of determination and persistence, and, there's tenacity, and there's a whole range of other words that sort of come around in that sphere. And I think there is, particularly when it comes to a startup that's, looking at investment to grow, there's some, I know how to say this, there's some sort of beauty in the suffering process, right? Like particularly at the moment, there's kind of a hard time for a lot of startups and businesses who are raising money, who are unable to raise money, and no one wants to see anybody fail or lose out because of a lack of capital. But at the same time, I also think there's sort of a rite of passage in all of this, and it is a multifaceted, a business is multifaceted. It's not just like one path forward and you get the money, you go. There are many dimensions to it in many ways. And certainly we try and look at the business as a sustainable enterprise that's going to hit profit, that's going to do all the things that a business and its fundamentals should do.
Yeah.
And so, there's certainly, I guess through that process, there's, I don't know, I guess you could call it hustle or whatever it is. There's the ability to hustle and do it, but there's also the ability to, I guess, keep down that track because you believe in you're doing what you think is right and you're adding to it every day and you can see the fruits of your labor.
Well, of course, the definition of an entrepreneur is taking a set of resources and taking them to a higher plane.
Yes. Yeah.
No, totally agree. So are you a reader? Any business books, podcasts?
Yeah, look, at times I've been better. I can't say that I've been particularly good at the moment around reading. I have just been handed a new book, which I've probably read fiction for the last little while to keep away as an alternative to focusing on business. But the one that was just given to me, which I haven't opened yet, but I have, which is I think Gold and the Theory of Constraints, which I've not got to yet, but will. There is, I don't know if you ever listened to, there's a Michael Lewis podcast called Against the Rules, which is not,
I have at times, yeah.
It's not strictly a business podcast, but there is an element just of psychology in the way that he unpacks different issues that, to your point before, when you go through your rejuvenation or you look at alternatives, that's when the ideas start coming. There's just something about all Michael Lewis podcasts that have, I guess, triggered for me new thoughts and new ways of approaching problems, which I quite like. And look, the other one that comes to mind, just because I mentioned it, there's some irony in this one. Have you ever read Atomic Habits? Atomic Habits?
No.
I've forgotten the name of the author, but the idea is that essentially you take a small incremental change and every day you add a little bit, and obviously it compounds. It's worth a lot more at the end. And it's just about the change in sort of systems and behaviors and habits. And it's a very good, I guess.
Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Yeah. So,
yes.
Well, look, the irony of that is I very much subscribe to the concept of small incremental changes, and it suits me personality-wise and the way we operate the business. The irony of it is I've sat down to try and read that book many times, and I never quite get through it, only because of the basis of actually setting up the habit of the reading.
It's really interesting. I'm a bit the same. He was actually interviewed in Australia on Tuesday.
Right.
Fabulous. And it's one of the 6 best-selling, business books ever.
Yeah, right.
But as you've summarized it really, really well. 1% better every day.
Yeah. Look, I think to the extent that you keep doing that, it actually is a sort of self-perpetuating cycle in a sense, because you do the small thing and you see the benefits of the business, and then you do it again, and then you're like, oh, we never have to do this again because we've actually fixed it forever, or we've improved it.
Yeah.
So I very much enjoy that part of our business and how we operate.
Okay, thank you. So my last question, any last piece of advice or parting words for an entrepreneur, or for that matter, an aspiring entrepreneur?
Look, I think there's an element of just do it. And I know that sounds a bit sort of trite, but, for me, if I reflect again on my experience, I had an idea. I was, a management consultant. I worked at a bank. I had, a suit and tie on and was still doing my day job, and then had a thought that, well, somebody might be interested in this and be willing to pay for it. And it's funny because it was a total coincidence that my first attempt at doing what was a very broken website at the time that didn't really work, but I just needed someone to trigger and pay.
Yep.
And that sort of, if you like, fired off a whole different series of chemicals in my brain that it was like, oh, I've produced something and someone's willing to pay for it. That's awesome. I'm going to go all guns blazing. And I think that, everybody will have a slightly different motivation for why they do things. But I just think, small steps to prove out the concept and then give yourself the comfort or confidence that you've kind of de-risked it means that you're then in a position to just go and do it. And so, doesn't matter what it is you want to achieve. I'm pretty certain that you can find a way to test or prove it out for, close to $0. So my view would be, you don't need to make a big sweeping statement of quitting your job or changing your life or moving countries. Like, actually, whatever it is that you're sort of trying to do.
So I've done all those.
Yeah. I know, but I genuinely think that most in today's world, most things can be resolved from your couch, and that where there's a will, there's a way. And so, if people are thinking about doing things, I'd say keep it simple and go find a way to prove that thing that you said was a good idea is in fact doable.
Yeah, of course, what you're talking about is a great accelerator, and I'm a bit older than you, so that technology wasn't there. I mean, it's a huge. If you just think of what AI is doing, and if you're starting your business today, or for that matter, I was starting my business today, how different the journey would be now that we have it at the basic level, ChatGPT and everything else.
Yes.
And, I listened to one of my virtual mentors last night, and he made the comment that if you're thinking about a new idea or a new something for your business, a new product or a new service, why don't you just do a poll? And the point he was making was that, we've got the technology is so great now, LinkedIn. Go and do a poll. Hey, I'm looking at launching this product next first quarter next year. Would you buy it? yeah, what would you, and a follow-up question, what would you like to be, and just you to see involved in it?
Yeah.
It was just like a nice little light bulb.
It's interesting because I think, again, the sort of general view tends to be that, the ideas are actually worth nothing. The execution is everything. And I think it's certainly proven to be true for us in this business as well, that I'm certainly not the first person to think of a platform for self-managing landlords. And maybe we're not the best at executing it, although I would argue that we are. But I think it's actually putting all the bits together and making it work that's been the exciting and arguably hard part.
Yeah. Well, that's a great spot for us to finish, Jeremy. Thank you.
Our pleasure. Thanks very much for having me.
Okay, so if anybody wants to contact Jeremy, in the show notes, I'll have all his contact details. The company is rentbetter.com.au. Fabulous concept. And Jeremy, I'm happy to get lots of inquiries from the people that listen to this.
Thanks very much.
Cheers. Thank you.
If you are hearing this message, you've listened to the entire episode, and for that, we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We hope you enjoyed this new episode, and if you did, please leave us a review on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, or wherever you watch/listen. Please share this episode with others who may be interested in this topic. If you want to be a guest on the podcast, please send an email to admin@scaleupgrowth.co. Put "Be a guest" in the subject line and tell me a little about yourself. If you want to gauge where your business growth potential is and identify where the biggest opportunities in your business lie, or where the key needs that you need to concentrate on right now are, take our assessment where you will receive personalised advice for improvement. It's quick and free. Go to scaleupgrowth.scoreapp.com. If you would like to work with me one-to-one, I love coaching and get the best outcomes that way. Send me an email to jonathan@scaleupgrowth.co and put one-to-one in the heading. Tell me a bit about your business and let's see how we can apply a great strategy for your business. So that's it for this week. Tune in next time for more great learnings from a scaling entrepreneur.